The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the first David Pakman Show during the regime of President Donald Trump. The era of the orange president-in-chief has begun, and it began with a truly bizarre speech among one of the most poorly attended inaugurations in a long time, followed by the biggest protests in American history, which we will get to. We will get to all of it, so I'm glad you're with us today. Trump seemed genuinely bored, annoyed, and just sort of uninterested during the entire inauguration. I got a pretty sinister vibe from the entire Trump clan sitting up there, sort of a dark energy and an absolutely ludicrous inauguration speech that many Trumpists thought were great. I had people tweeting me, Pat, about how wonderful the speech was. It's a beginning to the return of American greatness, etc. I found it to be nationalistic, but in a way that was just sort of feeling around in the dark for some kind of very concocted pseudo-patriotism and really devoid of any meaning.
I really just found it to be a genuinely poor speech. I mean, it was maybe 15 minutes long at the most. It sounded like he may have been able to write that himself. Yeah. Usually during inauguration speeches, there's this appeal to the people who didn't vote for you, right, of acknowledging your place in history. He didn't do any of that. None of it.
And we talked last week about how hard to believe it was that Trump was writing the speech himself. After hearing it, I think it's actually possible. I don't know if you've noticed that Trump seems incapable of complex sentence structure. You know, President Obama would be asked a question. He would say, let me say a couple of things. If he was asked about guns, he would first debunk the idea that he's gun grabbing and then use an analogy comparing seatbelts and the auto industry and reduction in fatality rates, real explanations. Trump, on the other hand, is President me verb noun is the way that I'm calling it, right? I make America great again. I repeal Obamacare. I build wall. Make America great again. He speaks in a way that could only appeal to someone who is incredibly unsophisticated.
And if you take the speech verbatim, too, he promised to eliminate crime, gangs, right, and disease.
And giving this vaguely nationalistic and bizarrely written speech, Trump chose multiple times to repeat an anti-Semitic slogan that he was specifically asked not to use by the Anti-Defamation League. It's called America First. To talk about foreign policy, this is a slogan that was used by people who were warning before the U.S. got into World War II that Jewish interests, Jewish Americans were pushing the U.S. to enter the war because of their own interests coming ahead of America's interests. And the idea of America First was to sort of fight back against, quote, Jewish trickery to pull us into World War II. And the crowd went wild every time Donald Trump used the slogan. The small crowd actually liked it. Take a look at this.
We assembled here today are issuing a new decree to be heard in every city, in every foreign capital, and in every hall of power. From this day forward, a new vision will govern our land. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first.
And I get that many people might see this as no big thing, but if you're not familiar with the history of this, this is significant. It involves Nazi sympathizer Charles Lindbergh. It plays significantly into anti-Semitic history. And this is not about Trump being anti-Semitic specifically. I know his daughter converted to Judaism because his son-in-law is Jewish, etc. But this is about who it resonates with. And we're actually going to be interviewing alt-right white separatist leader Richard Spencer, and I'll ask him about whether he likes this stuff. But it certainly is arousing the white supremacists that love Trump. David Duke, for example, actually sent out a tweet where he said, Dr. David Duke, Trump inauguration speech declares war on the neocons and promotes our slogan, America First. Maybe since Trump doesn't read anything, he actually thinks that America First is something new that he came up with. The real slogan of the Trump administration is going to be the same one as of the Trump campaign and as of the Trump transition team, which is we're feeling around in the dark to see how we can possibly make it another day. And they've certainly made it another day, and they're going to be around, Pat.
And again, I don't think Donald Trump is anti-Semitic. I don't think there's any reason to believe that. But this is some time for perspective here. This is the presidential inauguration.
No doubt about it. And perspective completely missing from the entire proceedings over the weekend. By the way, turnout super low for our first orange president in history's inauguration. I noticed this on Inauguration Day early in the morning. I even tweeted about it. You'll see that I actually sent out a tweet, which I can put up on the screen for you. I said, man, the Washington Mall looked half empty just now for Trump inauguration compared to 2009. Little did I know how much this would explode, up to and including Trump showing up for one of his first speeches as president at the CIA and using that opportunity to allege that news lied to hide the real inauguration of 1.5 million. It turns out that this is true, and his press secretary is building it all up. The truth is, very few people showed up. Let's take a look first at Donald Trump speaking to the CIA about this.
I made a speech. I looked out. The field it looked like 1.5 million people. They showed a field where there were practically nobody standing there. And they said, Donald Trump did not draw well. I said, it was almost raining. The rain should have scared him away, but God looked down and he said, we're not going to let it rain on your speech. In fact, when I first started, I said, oh, no. First line, got hit by a couple of drops.
Right.
And I said, oh, this is too bad, but we'll go right through it. But the truth is that it stopped immediately. It was amazing. And then it became really sunny. Then I walked off and it poured.
Yeah, million and a half people. Obviously not true. Trump later claiming the crowd was all the way back to the Washington Monument. That's not true. And Trump is learning to be a Republican quickly, mentioning that God was influencing the weather there, which is quite interesting. This is part of why the marches matter that took place, and I'll talk about those later, because President Donald Orange is obsessed with his popularity. Trumpists all over Facebook and Twitter telling me, oh, David, the reason turnout was low is because Trump supporters actually have jobs. Oh, yeah? Cite some sources that Trump supporters are more likely to be employed than non-Trump supporters. Please cite some sources there. And it's funny how I thought the problem was Obama's economy had no jobs. So on the one hand, you have the Trumpists saying there weren't that many people at the inauguration because Trumpists have jobs. I thought we didn't have jobs. That's why we voted for Trump instead of Hillary Clinton, because Trump's going to create jobs that don't exist. And then on the other side, you have, oh, no, actually media lied and turnout was in the millions. You've got to get your lying conspiracy theories straight, don't you?
Yeah, and I don't think anyone expected this inauguration to be well attended. I mean, he has a 37% approval rating, lost the popular vote by 3 million. And plus, to add to all that, you're in this liberal bubble of D.C., but just let it go. Don't make an issue out of it.
Well, they did make an issue out of it. Sean Spicer, the press secretary, cranked it up, actually saying this was the largest audience ever. He said, let's take it up a notch. And here's Sean Spicer giving his first appearance in front of the press, just making stuff up out of thin air.
Secondly, photographs of the inaugural proceedings were intentionally framed in a way, in one particular tweet, to minimize the enormous support that had gathered on the National Mall. This was the first time in our nation's history that floor coverings have been used to protect the grass in the mall. That had the effect of highlighting any areas where people were not standing, while in years past, the grass eliminated this visual. This was also the first time that fencing and magnetometers went as far back on the wall, preventing hundreds of thousands of people from being able to access the mall as quickly as they had in inaugurations past. Inaccurate numbers involving crowd size were also tweeted. No one had numbers because the National Park Service, which controls the National Mall, does not put any out. By the way, this applies to any attempts to try to count the number of protesters today in the same fashion.
Right.
We do know a few things, so let's go through the facts.
Please.
We know that from the platform where the president was sworn in to 4th Street holds about 250,000 people. From 4th Street to the media tent is about another 220,000. And from the media tent to the Washington Monument, another 250,000 people. All of this space was full when the president took the oath of office. We know that 420,000 people used the D.C. Metro public transit yesterday, which actually compares to 317,000 that used it for President Obama's last inaugural. This was the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period, both in person and around the globe.
Yeah, so obviously not true. The only thing smaller at Trump's inauguration than the turnout were Donald Trump's hands. We've got a bunch of pictures here to show you. Let's just start, and for the people who are watching, I'll explain to you what's going on here. So to begin with, this was the original picture we saw. Obama's crowd on the left, Trump's crowd on the right, drastically different. The Trump crowd on the right, it filled in a little bit more, but really not that much more. Okay, that's number one. Number two, this is the image the Trump campaign is tweeting out, which looks very full. But the reality is this area pictured here is always full. This is the area in front of the water. You'll see that the water is at the very, very top of this picture. This area is always full, and it's a couple 100,000 people. But the truth is, when you actually look bigger picture at who was there, what do we have next, Pat, to show people? This is a map of the different areas. You'll see at the top are the areas that were filled with people for President Obama's inauguration, and at the bottom, the areas that had people during the Donald Trump inauguration. It's also very interesting that there are pictures of the entire motorcade going by empty parade stands. There's more security than there are people in this part of the stands during the Trump inauguration. I was imagining, Pat, past press teams would try to figure out how to spin this, and they'd say, well, what if we cite this, or what if we sort of cast doubt in this way? And then the Trump press team, it's almost like they got together in a room and they said, what should we do? Let's just call it the most well-attended inauguration ever. What could possibly go wrong?
That's the thing. Don't believe your lying eyes. Believe Sean Spicer. He has it right.
The trend here is that everything is everyone's fault but Trump's. Media lied. Pictures were tweeted. Weather wasn't good. Trump's 37% approval on day one is why turnout was so low. Kellyanne Conway decided to coin a new phrase to participate in the lies about the terrible, pathetic, embarrassingly low attendance at Donald Trump's inauguration. The term is alternative facts. Yes, we know, Kelly, you've had them the entire campaign. Another name for them is lies. Here is her coining the term.
Excuse, and you did not answer the question.
I did answer your question.
No, you did not. You did not answer the question of why the president asked the White House press secretary to come out in front of the podium for the first time and utter a falsehood. Why did he do that? It undermines the credibility of the entire White House press office on day one.
Don't be so overly dramatic about it, Chuck. You're saying it's a falsehood, and they're giving Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts to that. But the point remains.
Alternative facts? Alternative facts, 4 of the 5 facts he uttered. The one thing he got right was Zeke Miller. 4 of the 5 facts he uttered were just not true. Look, alternative facts are not facts. They're falsehoods.
Chuck, do you think it's a fact or not that millions of people have lost their plans or health insurance and their doctors under President Obama? Do you think it's a fact that everything...
Yeah, look over here at this other shiny thing. Is this the new fake news, alternative facts? This is straight up Orwellian. I mean, Pat, this is out of George Orwell's 1984 doublespeak.
Yeah, it's one thing when you're having an argument with someone and you bring your set of facts to the table and they bring their set of facts, but you have to agree on what the facts are. There's no, what did she say? There's no alternative facts. That just doesn't exist.
Here's the thing, though, that no one is talking about. In the first moment of this interview, she already doesn't like the line of questioning, and she threatens to cut off access to NBC. I'm going to play for you now. What I just played is getting a lot of attention, and rightly so. Alternative facts are called lies or falsehoods in reality. Here is her threat to NBC News.
Why did the president send out his press secretary, who's not just the spokesperson for Donald Trump? He also serves as the spokesperson for all of America at times. He speaks for all of the country at times. Why put him out there for the very first time in front of that podium to utter a provable falsehood? It's a small thing, but the first time he confronts the public, it's a falsehood?
Chuck, I mean, if we're going to keep referring to our press secretary in those types of terms, I think that we're going to have to rethink our relationship here.
We are going to have to rethink our relationship if you criticize the undeniable lies that our press secretary utters as if he can't even control himself. This should be red alert. This is the authoritarian, fascistic stuff. I actually think all media should stop interviewing Kellyanne Conway. That will damage and anger Trump and Conway way more than what's going on, and don't even allow her to issue these threats. Just say, Kellyanne, you're off. We're not interviewing you because you just lie. And this is part of the broader approach, Pat, that the Trump team has, which is create doubt about what is even knowable. And then when there's a discrepancy, you put the Trumpists in the position of deciding, do I believe media or do I believe Donald? And a lot of them are going to choose Donald. It's in a way a brilliant strategy.
Right. The Trump administration and their spokespeople really just don't understand the dynamic between government and the media.
Right.
The media is there to hold you accountable. And if you can't defend yourself, I mean, try to come up with something else, but don't revoke their access.
No, and this is exactly the type of thing that we've been talking about in the lead up to the inauguration. And it is happening. We're in the first 72 hours, folks, and we already have straight up lies, provable lies, demonstrable lies from Trump, Spicer, and Kellyanne Conway, and included in that, a threat to revoke access to NBC News if they don't do what Kellyanne wants. It's the Trump regime, folks. I'm on Twitter at @dpacman. Talk to me about it.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Cameron Ayers. Cameron, thank you so much for being a David Pakman Show member. This is viewer-supported media. It has never been more important than in the era of Donald Trump that we actually support alternatives to corporate media. You can sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. You can also use the coupon code IVoted17 for a nice discount off of membership if you want. And remember, if you ever shop on Amazon.com, davidpakman.com/Amazon, go there before you shop. And then any shopping you do will support the work that we do. Appreciate everybody who regularly uses that link. All right, the suppression of free speech is beginning with the Donald Trump administration. We already saw that he was so triggered by the low inauguration attendance that he had his press secretary, Sean Spicer, go out there and just straight up lie to media, lies which were then represented by Kellyanne Conway, his counselor, as, quote, alternative facts on NBC News. That we talked about earlier. But we've also learned about a suppression of government speech that took place during the inauguration. The Twitter account for the National Park Service retweeted a tweet about the low turnout with pictures. I'll show you a picture of what that looked like. And as you can see here at the top of the image, it says National Park Service retweeted. And this was a comparison of 2009 inauguration attendance with 2017 inauguration attendance. Later that day, the NPS Twitter account, along with all the other Department of Interior accounts, went totally silent. The order reportedly came from a career staffer at the department who instructed employees that the new administration has said that the department and all bureaus are not supposed to tweet this weekend and wait for guidance from Trump until Monday. And the message continued, please make sure that any scheduled tweets are no longer scheduled. This was an order. This was not a request. Very quickly, the retweet about the inauguration attendance from the National Park Service was undone. And the following day, this tweet was sent. Take a look at this. We regret the mistaken retweets from our account yesterday and look forward to continuing to share the beauty and history of our parks with you. Shouldn't they know by now, Pat? Twitter is only to be used by government officials when spreading propaganda about our glorious and fearless orange leader. Any tweets that don't express admiration for the dear leader are to be stopped or removed immediately.
It's very concerning, especially considering that the National Park Service and the Department of the Interior aren't too political of organizations. So if he's doing this to them, you can only imagine what he's going to do to other departments and to foreign governments too.
This is the reality under Trump. And what will the people who are supposed supporters of free and open speech say as Twitter accounts are limited, as media outlets are kicked out of having access to the president or staffers? You would hope that they would fight back, but I assume the Trumpians will just accept because, hey, it is our glorious leader who is sending out these dictates. We're going to follow it, and it is getting ugly already. I want to talk about the Women's March and the huge, huge anti-Trump protests, not only in Washington, D.C., but all over the world. We're talking about 500,000 people in Washington, D.C., in the millions nationally. Huge, fantastic. Not a single arrest in Washington, D.C. as of 6 p.m. on Saturday, according to D.C. police. Attendance at the protests drastically overshadowing attendance at our orange president's inauguration. Absolutely fantastic. I went to the one in Boston on Saturday. Absolutely inspiring turnout. Really good speakers. Senator Elizabeth Warren, Senator Ed Markey, lots of other elected officials and activists. Really good stuff from Senator Warren. Specific, pointed strategy, opposing specific initiative, how to work it. Also talking about science and climate change. Really good stuff. And then it fell apart so hard, so badly, that I left truly questioning whether progressives will get it together. Various activists start coming up, and it's all identity politics and self-destructive, non-strategic talking points about the patriarchy and aggressive feminism and speaking as a blank person type stuff. Identity politics failed during the last election. And I said during the post-election protests in November, if you're just getting the anger and frustration out now, okay. But eventually we've got to get to productive strategy. Trump has been inaugurated now, and I understand feeling afraid because of your identity, but we know that this laser focus on identity politics doesn't work. The Republicans put up a laughably unqualified, clueless orange buffoon, and an incredibly qualified candidate in Hillary Clinton couldn't defeat him. And yes, Russia, voter suppression, the FBI investigation, the email scandal, antipathy towards Obama in some states, it all played a role. But it should have been such a blowout that it wouldn't even have mattered. And identity politics couldn't even get enough people out to vote on a single day to defeat Donald Trump. And now identity politics is going to get people in the trenches to block legislation and make calls and send emails and organize boycotts, which is way more energy intensive than just voting. Wrong. It's not going to work. And Bernie Sanders had lots of support from the identity politics types, but it was catalyzed by a focus not on the immutable characteristics you're born with, but it was a class-based critique with the understanding that through class and economics and fighting corruption and cronyism, minority groups are going to be disproportionately helped. The problem with identity politics based on race and gender is that you're not appealing in a similar enough way to broad enough coalitions. The left needs a real plan here for the next 4 years. And it's not going to be catalyzed in any way by ranting about the patriarchy, citing the debunked statistic of 77 cents on the dollar, and talking about as a Muslim woman, ... In many ways, a rising tide lifts all boats is bogus. For example, tax cuts for the rich do not help poor people. They give rich people more money to save rather than invest in the economy. However, dealing with the issues that affect all people in the lower and middle classes, in other words, most people in our country, will most acutely help the people that are disproportionately impacted by these problems. This includes racial minorities, ethnic minorities, immigrants, women, LGBT individuals. Why was Occupy Wall Street so successful in almost single-handedly inserting the discussion about income and wealth inequality into the national dialogue? Because they approached the problem from an economic and corruption perspective. The beneficiaries of the issue will be those disproportionately affected, the identity groups we've been talking about. What is the goal now of these protests? Trump won. We need a plan to block actions, not to talk about the patriarchy. It has to be a message about what is fair and what is unjust. It needs to be a message about corruption versus anti-corruption. It has to be about who's lining their own pockets versus who's actually doing something to help the average person. That's the message that will unify real broad-based progressivism rather than getting into the oppression Olympics or appealing to specific groups in this way. Again, Occupy wasn't perfect, but they did this. Going to the bathroom on police cars, all that stuff around Occupy Wall Street that corporate media like talking about. But the message transcended identity to actual equality, fairness, corruption, and crony capitalism, and the problems inherent in the system rather than the symptoms of right now. I hope, Pat, that my fellow progressives will join me in organizing in this way. I'm concerned that the same low percentage of people will turn out to vote again in 2018 once the emotion of all this passes. We need to organize to ensure that Republicans lose control of the Senate and the House of Representatives in the midterms. There's governor's races to work on, and we need to focus on economics, corruption, cronyism, destructive vulture capitalism. That is the path forward, I believe.
Yeah, and if you even look at the other side, I mean, Donald Trump won because there was this collection, right? There was the people who were the more white working class voters. There were people who you may even classify as deplorables. It really takes a village to win something like this.
Send me your thoughts about this. I am inspired by the turnout, but I am concerned by some of the specifics. And there were lots of great discussions that took place. But in Boston, at least, I was a little worried about where the focus was. If you're just going to call me not really progressive because of my criticism, I don't think that is really a good critique. Critique the pragmatics of what I am saying if you want to critique what I'm saying. Donald Trump's actions so far. What has President-elect Donald Trump done so far as of today, January 23rd? Let's take a look. First of all, President Trump has filed an executive order minimizing the economic burden of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act pending repeal. What does this actually do? We're not really sure, but it may make it so that enforcement of that individual mandate of the Affordable Care Act is not enforced as strongly in what we assume will be a precursor to the eventual total repeal of Obamacare. Donald Trump has signed Senate Bill 81. This is a waiver for Defense Secretary James Mattis. Normally, you need to wait 7 years after leaving the military to become Defense Secretary. And President Trump has signed a waiver allowing James Mattis to become Defense Secretary after only 3 years out of the military. Donald Trump has also suspended the mortgage premium rate cut. So what this is really bad for a lot of low and middle income Americans. When you get a new mortgage, you typically put 20% down if you want to avoid paying what's called PMI, private mortgage insurance. And that private mortgage insurance is pretty expensive. And what has happened here is that a rate cut that was signed by President Obama on January 9th, set to go into effect on the 27th, has been canceled by Donald Trump. This makes it more expensive for poorer and middle income people to buy houses. This is a really, really bad thing. I don't know how this is making America great again for the little guy. Donald Trump also has received the legal okay from the Justice Department for his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, to work for the White House, legalized nepotism. And Donald Trump has signed Proclamation 1, declaring a National Day of Patriotism. This does absolutely nothing. It will not be a federal holiday, but it will play pretty well to the Trumpians into the whole I'm making America patriotic again thing. Which of these items, Pat, is setting us back on the path to American greatness? I'm confused.
I can't think of one in particular. The picture that we have behind us here is him immediately after the inauguration speech, signing a bunch of different bills there. And he just, the whole time, seemed quite uninterested in what he was actually doing. Yeah. And it kind of made me feel the vibe that he was just a puppet there.
Yeah, I had no clue what it was that he thought he was doing there, because everything that he's been doing has been very, very strange. And today, apparently, he's going to formally demand that NAFTA be renegotiated or the U.S. pulls out, officially remove the U.S. from TPP. We're expecting things to happen. We'll report on those as they happen. Here's what happened so far. If you're a Trumpist, which one of these day one things that he did is making America great again? Let me know. Discuss it with us on Reddit, davidpakman.com/Reddit.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
With over 20 million followers, Donald Trump is the 68th most followed person on Twitter. Twitter has been by far Trump's most frequent mode of communication to the public throughout the 2016 primaries, the general election, and as president-elect. Trump once tweeted, "Many people have said I'm the world's greatest writer. of 140-character sentences. Trump has obviously been an unorthodox political candidate and president-elect in the way that he speaks and conducts himself in person, like in debates and at rallies, and we've seen him carry that over to his tweeting, taking the conventions of how politicians use social media and throwing them out the window. His impulsive, bold, bombastic demeanor has translated verbatim to his use of Twitter, where he regularly touts his accomplishments, hastily mocks people, and doesn't always check facts. Trump has said when he becomes president that he'll dial back the tone of his tweets, and it'll be fascinating to see whether or not he keeps this promise, as undoubtedly we've never seen a U.S. president carry himself the way that Donald Trump does on Twitter. It would probably be destructive, or at the very least extremely odd, to have a U.S. president that is constantly sending out little daily messages on the internet bragging about how great he is or insulting anyone who crosses him. Thus far, right up to his inauguration, Trump has proven that he has absolutely no ability to withstand criticism and just brush anything off, even little things, like when an actor criticizes him. This is the definition of being thin-skinned. He has shown us time and again for years now that he must unconditionally pick up his phone and ridicule almost anyone that says something negative about him. This is not a great trait for a president. We will have to wait and see how his Twitter use evolves as president, if it does, but I thought it would be interesting to take a look back at Donald Trump's history on Twitter prior to becoming president. Since the beginning of the 2016 election cycle, Trump has averaged about 11 tweets a day, and the longest he's gone without tweeting was only for a day and a half this past November. He once tweeted 87 times in one day, his personal record, on October 19th of 2016. Sometimes it's just a way for him to check in with the public and send a little greeting, like last May when he wished everyone a happy Cinco de Mayo and said, "The best taco bowls are made in Trump Tower Grill. I love Hispanics." Sometimes it's a way for him to channel his thoughts about issues that are important to him, like the 117 tweets he has posted saying that climate change is a hoax or is unimportant, including a total of 47 tweets saying that global warming isn't real because it was cold at the moment he was tweeting, or his 31 tweets implying that vaccinations cause autism, or his 84 tweets suggesting that President Obama was born in Kenya. And sometimes Trump uses Twitter as an outlet for his signature brand of no-holds-barred, confrontational communication, that brash, politically incorrect delivery that so many of the Trumpist supporters love, like the 61 times he tweeted about Rosie O'Donnell, or his 158 tweets about Megyn Kelly, or either of these classic tweets. Mitt Romney had his chance to beat a failed president, but he choked like a dog. Now he calls me racist, but I am the least racist person there is. And, sorry losers and haters, but my IQ is one of the highest, and you all know it. Please don't feel so stupid or insecure. It's not your fault. It's mostly easy to tell which tweets are written by Trump and which ones are written by people who work for him. Data scientist David Robinson analyzed the text from Trump's Twitter account and found that tweets containing messages that are angry, hyperbolic, or braggadocious, tweets that use exclamation points and emotionally charged words like crazy or dumb, tend to come from an Android mobile operating system, while the more benign tweets, things like links and photos or positive messages, come from an iPhone. It's known that Trump carries a Samsung Galaxy, which is an Android smartphone, so we can pretty firmly conclude from the operating system and the language that's used that, generally speaking, tweets that say things like Merry Christmas or thanks for coming out to the rally today come from his social media staff, people like Brad Parscale or Dan Scavino, while Trump himself is the author of tweets that convey things like bragging and disdain. Twitter also seems to be one of Donald Trump's favorite ways of negotiating financially with private companies. On December 6, Trump sent out a tweet about the aircraft manufacturer Boeing, saying that their design for the new Air Force One is too expensive. Trump said, "Boeing is building a brand new 747 Air Force One for future presidents, but costs are out of control, more than $4 billion. Cancel order." Even though both Boeing and the White House said that Trump's claim wasn't accurate, Boeing's stock price quickly dropped after that tweet. A week later, Trump took a shot at defense contractor Lockheed Martin on Twitter, saying that they were charging too much for F-35s. After that tweet, Lockheed's market value dropped by $4 billion. There's now actually a mobile app that's been created that will alert users when Donald Trump badmouths a company so that they can sell while the stock prices are down. The developer of the app said in a blog post, "This one-of-a-kind trigger notifies you when President-elect Trump tweets about a publicly traded stock that you own in real time. These triggers can help you capture moves or manage your holdings based on the market's reaction to the future president's remarks." The New York Times determined that about 1 in every 9 of Trump's tweets is some kind of insult. On Twitter, Trump has used the word overrated 39 times. He's called someone a moron 52 times. He's said 55 times that someone, quote, doesn't have a clue. He's used the phrase haters and losers 64 times. He's called someone a lightweight 101 times. He's called someone stupid 183 times. He's called someone dumb 222 times. And on Twitter, Trump has used the word loser 234 times. He's also ended 81 tweets with the word sad, followed by an exclamation point. Before Ted Cruz dropped out of the Republican primary, an analysis of Trump's tweets shows that his Twitter insults were abundantly aimed at Republicans, like when he tweeted these two photos side by side comparing his wife to Ted Cruz's wife with the caption, "A picture is worth 1,000 words." And during the general election, statistics show that his Twitter insults were mostly at Democrats, crooked Hillary, crazy Bernie, goofy Elizabeth Warren, and when Trump won the presidency, his insults towards politicians saw a big drop-off. But the rate at which Trump insults the media on Twitter has remained pretty constant. Trump rarely misses an opportunity to try and discredit anyone in journalism who says something unfavorable about him. Whenever a news outlet runs a negative story on him, he's often quick to pull out his phone and tweet about how stupid or untrustworthy or unsuccessful the news organization is. According to Donald Trump's tweets, CNN is bad television, garbage, and just plain dumb, and most recently, fake news from his press conference. Fox News is totally biased and disgusting. MSNBC has no ratings. The BBC has zero credibility. Univision might be controlled by the Mexican government. The New York Times is poorly run and managed. The Wall Street Journal are a bunch of dummies. USA Today is a boring newspaper with no mojo. The New York Daily News is a worthless, dying loser newspaper. The Weekly Standard is failing. The New Hampshire Union Leader is failing. The Des Moines Register is seriously failing. The National Review is failing and dying and has been losing for years. New York Magazine is a piece of garbage. Esquire magazine is boring. Vanity Fair is really, really boring. And Time magazine, quote, looks really flimsy. Trump doesn't spare individuals in the media either when they say something negative about him. If you're a journalist online or on TV questioning something that Donald Trump has said or done, there's a pretty good chance that he'll hop on Twitter and get his revenge against you. Trump once tweeted, "When someone attacks me, I always attack back, except 100 times more. This has nothing to do with a tirade, but rather a way of life." According to Trump, Katie Couric is a third-rate reporter. Ariana Huffington is ugly both inside and out. Barry Diller is a sad and pathetic figure. Toure Niblet is a truly stupid guy. Megyn Kelly is so average in every way. George Will is perhaps the most boring political pundit on TV. Frank Luntz is a total loser. Sherry Jacobus is a major loser and really dumb. Charles Krauthammer is a boring, dopey, overrated dummy clown. John Oliver is very boring. Jon Stewart is overrated, not smart, and has no talent. Anna Navarro has no talent. Bryant Gumbel is an arrogant, dumb, racist dope with no talent. Mika Brzezinski is a neurotic mess. Chuck Todd is a real loser with sleepy eyes that will be fired like a dog. Harry Hurt is a dummy dope. Dom Lemon is a lightweight and dumb as a rock. Chris Matthews has the lowest IQ on television, and Eric Erickson is a major sleaze buffoon, total lowlife dummy. Trump once tweeted, "How come every time I show anger, disgust, or impatience, enemies say I had a tantrum or meltdown? Stupid or dishonest people?" Shortly after winning the election, Trump claimed that he would have won the popular vote if it weren't for millions of illegal voters casting ballots for Hillary Clinton. Of course, there's no evidence whatsoever to back that up. And when CNN senior Washington correspondent Jeff Zeleny pointed that out, Trump attacked Zeleny by retweeting a high schooler. Trump quoted 16-year-old Seth Morton from California, who said, "Pathetic. You have no sufficient evidence that Donald Trump did not suffer from voter fraud. Shame, bad reporter." Obviously, pointing out that there's no evidence that it didn't happen isn't proof that it did happen, common logical fallacy. But that aside, you could tell that this teenager's tweet wasn't originally written by Trump because no one was being called ugly or dumb. Someone once sent a tweet to our new president and said, "Why do you always insist on calling people names and trying to taunt like a kid in a schoolyard?" Trump replied, "Only stupid people." When a president says something, people listen, people act. What the president says matters and has national and global impacts. If Congress is voting down a bill he likes, is he going to go on Twitter and start calling senators losers? If we're having a dispute with another country, is he going to tweet that their president is a lightweight moron? This will be an embarrassment to the United States. Trump has said that he'll be more presidential on social media after he's sworn into office, but just a few days before his inauguration, he was on Twitter calling actress Meryl Streep an overrated flunky because she said something about him without even mentioning him by name at the Golden Globe Awards. Just close your eyes and try to imagine Barack Obama or George W. Bush being so thin-skinned and reacting that way. Try to picture one of those two presidents, or any other president for that matter, going on an angry name-calling tirade just because some celebrity said something about them. It's difficult to imagine. This is the guy we have representing the United States to the rest of the world, in charge of the military, responsible for diplomacy with nations like Iran, China, North Korea. When it comes to Trump's promise to tighten up on Twitter, let's hope he does differently than he's previewed during his transition period and actually keeps his word.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
All references to climate change, except one which makes fighting climate change seem like a really bad thing, have been removed as of 12 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday, January 20th. At 11:59 a.m. Eastern Time, the Obama White House website had a long list of information about the threat of climate change, the steps the federal government had taken under President Obama to fight it. And at noon, the instant that Donald Trump took office, the page was gone, as well as any mention of climate change or global warming, except for referring to President Obama's climate action plan as harmful, unnecessary, and something that the Trump administration would get us out of. Preventing climate change is harmful and unnecessary. What has to happen for Trump to change his position on that? Trump Tower falling into the ocean? First, America first, during his inauguration speech, an old anti-Semitic slogan. Trump asked not to use it by the Anti-Defamation League. And then now, the only place that climate change is mentioned on the Trump White House website is negative. Of course, scientists and professors around the country were downloading and rehosting all of that climate change data. Some people, Pat, said, oh, it's paranoid because nothing's going to change about all this under Donald Trump. Within seconds of Donald Trump being inaugurated, everything about climate change gone from the White House website.
That's exactly right. I guess he wasn't persuaded by the meeting that he had with Al Gore and Ivanka Trump during the transition. I mean, we don't really know too much about his position on climate change. He's made some hilarious comments about it. But the issue here is that Republicans are back in control. And of course, they're going to defer to the interests of big oil and big coal.
Yeah, I mean, all of his references to climate change as a hoax created by the Chinese. What does Trump really think? I don't know. He got a lot of mileage from that. But ultimately, what Pat is pointing out is what matters, which is look at who has been appointed to work for Donald Trump and look at some of the other little bits and pieces that are on the Trump website. As, for example, the following quote: "For too long, we've been held back by burdensome regulations on our energy industry. President Trump is committed to eliminating harmful and unnecessary policies such as the Climate Action Plan and the Waters of the U.S. rules. Lifting these restrictions will greatly help American workers." Yeah, get those coal miners their jobs back. Coal makes no sense. It's laughable to try to revitalize the coal industry, as Donald Trump claims to want to do. The world is laughing at us. And by the way, not that this is something to brag about for Obama, domestic oil production grew more under President Obama than under any prior president in U.S. history. It's embarrassing that this is what the Donald Trump administration is doing. Meanwhile, India's rebuilding their energy infrastructure from the ground up around clean energy sources. China, like I told you last week, is closing down plans for 80 to 100 coal plants and investing $360 billion in clean energy. And we're going backwards and trying to revitalize coal.
Well, at least this was the only topic that the White House website took down from its site, right?
LGBT stuff as well, I believe. So
civil rights.
Civil rights as well. Yes, not the only thing at all, and very, very disturbing. And we're going to keep following it, and it's going to get bad. And we need independent media at this time. I've been harping about it for months. It has never been more clear, and I hope you'll join us as a member at davidpakman.com/membership. Madonna was at the D.C. Women's March on Saturday. She let slip that she has thought a lot about blowing up the White House in reaction to Donald Trump's election as president. Here she is addressing the crowd of about 500,000 people, more than the number that attended Donald Trump's inauguration, by the way. Take a look.
I'm angry. Yes, I am outraged. Yes, I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House. But I know that this won't change anything. We cannot fall into despair.
She also used the F word 3 times. CNN and MSNBC cut away after the 3rd time. I assume Fox News wasn't airing this to begin with, so they had nothing to cut away from. Bad idea to joke about this. Obviously, Madonna has no actual intent nor plan to blow up the White House. Reportedly, this did trigger awareness from Secret Service. I think the funniest part about all this is that right-wingers on Twitter and online, they're saying, we were offended by Madonna's use of the F word and saying F Trump. If grab 'em by the pussy wasn't enough for you not to vote for Trump, you don't really get to complain about Madonna using the F word on TV. It's such blatant fake drama, double standard hypocrisy, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think they're going to need a safe space. I mean, I don't think this was the right move by Madonna's part. I think there are plenty of ways to get your effective speech out. Of course, without making any threats like this. This was too far.
She did eventually say that she thought about it, but then realized that it wouldn't actually change anything. And I think that's the key part to take from what Madonna said here. And again, I'm against joking about blowing up the White House in such a public way when you're such a prominent person. But she did make the right point, which is even if we blew up the White House, it wouldn't change anything. To change things, you actually need to organize. Voting's a key part of it. Turnout alone could have blocked Trump from even winning. We wouldn't even be having this conversation right now. And the interesting thought is that she immediately retracted the entire blow up the White House thing, saying it was misinterpreted. I take it back, period. Republicans like Trump were threatening Obama constantly for 8 years, including with this whole fake birth certificate, he's not an American thing. They've never apologized or retracted anything. And Madonna, within hours, says, yeah, bad idea, shouldn't actually have said that. If you're going to take away anything from this, it's that you can't vote for pussy grabber in chief and be offended at the F word. And number 2, you need to organize, and turnout alone could have blocked any of this nonsense from even starting. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Let's listen to this interesting voicemail together.
Yeah, your podcast show and all that, you're a big joke. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't you go back to Argentina and stay there?
Yeah. Well, there's a few reasons why. I mean, mostly that I live here now, I guess is the reason. You're under no obligation to listen to the podcast. It's always interesting when people are so put off by what we're doing, yet they insist on listening or watching. There's many other things to watch. You're under no, you're not strapped into headphones and you have to listen to the David Pakman Show. Check out something else. On the bonus show today, did we watch the inauguration? How much of it did we watch? What did we hear about it from friends? We'll talk about that and more. Also, we have a very controversial interview upcoming, and I want to talk about that with you. And there's also a whole other set of anti-Trump marches and rallies planned, and I'll tell you all about it on the bonus show. DavidPakman.com/membership. That's the one place to sign up for membership. You get instant access to all of the member benefits, including but not limited to the exclusive members-only bonus show, as well as commercial-free audio and video streams of the show. We are viewer and listener-supported media. Help us to continue doing what we do by signing up at davidpakman.com/membership. If normal pricing is high, use the coupon code I voted 17. I don't need you to pay full price if full price is a burden to you. I just want you involved at whatever level is comfortable. So you can use coupon code I voted 17 and get a big discount. All right, we'll talk to you on the bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.